Hello and good evening from Savannah, Georgia. My name is Timothy Halloran. I am an astrologer and my website is rasalilahealing.com. Today is Tuesday, October 31st, 2017. And so, a big happy Halloween and happy Samhain to those of you in the Northern Hemisphere, and happy Beltane to those of you in the Southern Hemisphere. Special thanks to my clients in the Southern Hemisphere for the reminder. And so, today is one of those mystical days, renowned for the veil being transparent. This is All Saints' Day, Hallows' Eve, Day of the Dead, and this is the celebration of the Scorpio season, yes? And so Halloween in itself is a really fascinating, pretty weird type of holiday, being this recycling of old, suppressed pagan celebrations, and that being combined with the unconscious celebration of Scorpio. And so, every single year on Halloween, Samhain, Beltane, there is the sun transiting through the sign of Scorpio. Now, particularly this year, it's an extra specially Scorpio type of Halloween, as the sun is also conjoined Jupiter in Scorpio. Mercury is still in Scorpio until November 5th. And so, again, like we've been talking about, Scorpio, deep, mystical, profound, dark, scary, mysterious, having to do with death, the occult, mysteries, taboos, sexuality, disclosure, what is hidden and what is beneath the surface. And Scorpio is the sign of evolutionary transformation. It is the fusion reactor of our reality and solar system, which stirs the pot with full spectrum experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly, which catalyzes change, which provokes soul growth and us coming into our power. And so, yeah, a lot of shit typically gets stirred up during Scorpio, particularly this year. And so, lo and behold, since Jupiter moved into Scorpio on October 10th, I mean, there's been so much disclosure already. The JFK files came out. There's been already 1 billion sexual scandals coming to the surface. Isn't that remarkable? This is Jupiter in Scorpio, and particularly right now with the Sun and Mercury also being there. Now, this can also be a considerably heavy time. We'll talk about the dynamics that can be coming up personally and in relationship. And again, this is a period of change and transformation. Scorpio is our unconsciousness, the majority of the iceberg beneath the water, and a large way that we learn about our unconsciousness is sort of by ramming it or creating friction with other people in their own unconsciousness. And so there can sometimes be fireworks, explosions, interesting dramas that stirs up so many emotions that can be very passionate and powerful. And again, all of this is in the endeavor of soul evolution, soul growth, by being made aware of our own unconsciousness, of the stuff that goes way deep down below, beneath the surface. So before we get into this week's full moon and the coming transits, as far as tonight goes, for those of you who might be going out trick-or-treating or spending time with your kids, pay attention. I'm very curious to your experiences and feel free to share them, because tonight the moon is in Pisces conjoined Chiron. Mercury is in Scorpio trine to Moon and Chiron, and the sun is in Scorpio trine to Neptune. This is a thoroughly deep, mystical, weird, ethereal Halloween. And again, it can be weird. There can be a sense of it's quiet, it's almost too quiet, or I feel like I'm weirdly merging with the people that are around me. Things seem a little bit too close for comfort. And there can be, again, this weirdness. Halloween is weird. The unconscious celebration of Scorpio, the unconscious portrayal of the old age pagan religions being deemed evil, demonic, and shoved under. Very strange. And then this is celebrated and sort of played with, you know. And so the moon with Chiron tonight, pay attention to what's going on, what might be going on beneath the surface, because there can also be these collective themes that are being felt. The wounds of our world, of our history, of our society, of our religions, of our beliefs, so on and so forth. There can be some investigation and some portraying of some of these underlying dynamics. So again, anyways, pay attention and let me know if you have some interesting experiences. I would love to hear about them in the comment section below. And again, this can be a thoroughly heavy and challenging time because we have all of this Scorpio energy happening simultaneously with Saturn completing his final square to Chiron. And these squares have been going on the last year. This is a big rite of passage transit. It's really not light or fun or games. And I think this may be why a good number of astrologers don't even touch Chiron. Chiron is the wound. And Saturn is the big meanie, big blue meanie that forces us to grow up and come into our inner strength. Saturn ultimately is not a bad guy, but he throws hurdles at us, challenges at us that we do have to overcome in order to initiate ourselves into our own capability. And so, Saturn square to Chiron can really be holding us down in our wounds, in the past dynamics that can just totally seem unfair or unjust or like punishment or like our bad karma or like how messed up and cruel this world situation is, and how we may have been, again, somewhat scarred or impressed by this messed up world, by our cultural conditioning downloaded to us as children. You know, Chiron in Pisces is healing our own wounds connected to the collective, what we just sort of soaked up like helpless little sponges in our past, in our childhood. And Saturn is again forcing us there to the bottom of the barrel stuff. And we are having to look at it, and it's not fun. It can be painful. It can seem unfair. You know, Chiron is like the wound that seems unfair, and it just seems like the card that we were dealt, and we may feel bad or inadequate or feel guilty like it's our karma, but it's not. It's actually the wound which initiates us into being compassionate, heart-awakened healers in our world through recognizing the painful places in ourself that came from the painful places in the world, so we can bring our awareness to those places and figure out what the heck to do to change these things. As I've been saying the whole last year, this Saturn square Chiron can be initiating us into making changes, healing ourselves, and becoming a healer in the world, being inspired by as much as what we don't like that we've experienced and see in the world, not just necessarily what we do. And so yes, this is a rite of passage. It is a deep, profound healing time, and we have to heal. That's the Saturn square Chiron. It's like there's no choice, you know. It just feels like getting juiced. It feels like the steamroller is going over us. And there's really two choices, because we always have free will, in terms of how to go through this juicing process. We can become defensive and crippled and hide away and isolate ourselves and become bitter and resentful to the world which ran us over, and become like the scorpion with its hard shell and its stinger, ready to lash off at anything. That's one possibility. And the other possibility is to just let the damn juicing juice us. And it is somewhat like bloodletting. We can feel our wounds, and pay attention to where Chiron is in your chart. I'll have to do a future workshop and videos on Chiron, because Chiron's important on our own natal chart and not often mentioned enough. Wherever Chiron is in your chart is where you experience that woundedness that initiates you into being the healer of that particular wound by being juiced, by having those experiences sort of crush us into releasing this essence that is a transcendental bliss. It is an ecstasy that is the fusion of heaven and hell, awakening our heart to compassion. We can't fall asleep in this world. There's too much injustice. There's too much suffering. There's too much pain. And it is pain and suffering which actually awakens our hearts into being the spiritual warriors of our day and age. This is the sacred heart, flaming heart with thorn symbol. This is Chiron. And so again, wherever Chiron is in your chart, these themes can be really coming up. We're getting forced there. We have to look at this. But in allowing ourselves to get juiced, there's a cathartic releasing. This is what Chiron does. Purges and cathartically releases the past inadequacy, shame, sense of condemnation, isolation, imprisonment, whatever it may be. It's like food poisoning being purged out of our system, and it's not pleasant, like when you eat bad restaurant food and then spend the night purging it out in the toilet. Not necessarily a fun experience, but it pays off. It's clearing these debris and this stagnation and this conditioning out. Oh, we think that we are imprisoned to this nature. We think this is just the card that we were dealt, and that limits our capacity to be helpers, to be healers, to be catalysts of change in the world. And so this stuff is being removed, and we're seeing what's blocking us right now. And that's not comfortable, but it does pay off. And so we have to keep pushing. And this is the initiation into a really profound depth of actually practically useful healing in ourselves and in the world by owning this opportunity to get to work and to step up in our own healing journey. It's either that or self-sacrifice and be the mean scorpion. And so that's Saturn. It limits our capability to really be free, spontaneous, but there is this much deeper healing work happening beneath the surface. And there is much these days that can be going on in relationships. Yep. A couple weeks ago, we had a new moon in Libra opposite to Uranus. And so that new moon carries through the entire lunar cycle until the next new moon. So this is all about experimentation, pushing on boundaries, and revolutionizing how we're doing relationship dynamics, how we're connecting with the other, what we're sharing, what groups we're connecting with, is all this highly malleable, experimental, trial and error, see what works, see what doesn't, but redefine yourself and redefine your relationship in order to be more liberated than what you ever knew was possible before. Not only that, it's important to do that experimentation and have the conversations. This is the big transit going on this last week, and this next week is Mercury square to the moon's north node, the moon's nodes. This was exact on yesterday, the 30th. And again, it's carrying through this next week, really until the end of the first week of November. Mercury square the moon's nodes is have the deep conversations. Mercury in Scorpio is the detective going down into the unconsciousness, the shadow, the complex, difficult, murky areas of our life, and we need to express these things. Whenever there is a planet square to the moon's nodes, it is called a skipped step. And that means that in order to do our soul's evolutionary direction, which is depicted by the moon's north node, moon's north node is in Leo. It's about actualizing our creativity, our inner divinity, our own light and spontaneity and playfulness and freedom to be a child, to be a soul, to be a child of God. Well, in order to be that liberated and free, we've got to clear this stuff out. That's what's happening. We have to have these conversations, the bottom of the barrel stuff. Have the conversations, get it all on the table. Do not keep anything under the rug. Do not keep anything to yourself. A skipped step means if we sweep it under the rug, it's gonna have to come back again later, and it very well may blow up in our faces. And so this is the time for those deep, healing, transformative conversations, even if they're not easy, even if they're somewhat intense, digging into the bottom of the barrel, even if it's somewhat dramatic and tumultuousness and feelings get swept up, these conversations are important and needed in terms of this liberation we can be integrating into our soul. Mercury moves into Sagittarius November 5th. And so in November, we're going to get more of this Jupiterian, intuitive, big picture perspective of what's going on in our life, how we can achieve our goals, how we can share our truth. And this theme has gone on the last week with the Sun conjunct Jupiter. The Jupiter themes remain. So let's move on and talk about this full moon. Coming up this Saturday, November 4th, at approximately 1:20 a.m. Eastern Time, that's 10:20 p.m. Pacific Time, on the, let's see, that'd be the 3rd. And this is a full moon at 11 degrees 59 minutes of Taurus. Now, the full moon in Taurus is ruled by Venus. So again, these themes and dynamics having to do with relationship and the other, as well as what we value and treasure inside of ourselves, and how we are sharing our cherished treasures with others, is a dynamic and theme that comes up with this full moon in Taurus. Now, Taurus is the opposite sign of Scorpio. Like we said, Scorpio is tumultuousness, evolution, intensity, the full spectrum that catalyzes change and allows us to come into our soul's power. And guess what? So much Scorpio, intensity, transformation, disclosure, putting it out on the table can be exhausting. Whenever we go through periods of intensity and change for an extended period, we get drained, even on a soul level. And it must therefore be followed by a period of settling down and integration in order to keep our sanity levels, in order to keep our physical energy levels. We have to keep this balance of Scorpio and Taurus going. Easier said than done, because this full moon in Taurus is square to the moon's nodes, which is again a skipped step. And I have this skipped step full moon, or moon in Taurus, in my own natal chart, so perhaps this is something I can talk a little bit about. Again, we need the Taurus integration. What is Taurus? Time to settle down, space for yourself, to come into your own sovereign, stable, self-contained, self-resourceful inner sanctuary. And not only inner, reflected in our immediate environment as well. It is safe, stable space. And this is the challenge, because so much Scorpio is involvement with the other. Moon's in Pisces tonight, all of this giving. This full moon is also square to asteroid Ceres in Leo. And asteroid Ceres is the #1 asteroid, the first one to be discovered, and really she's a minor planet, perfectly spherical, floating in the asteroid belt. She's square to the full moon, which means that there can be conflict between taking care of ourselves versus taking care of others. Our own values, our own nurturance needs, what makes us feel good and comfortable, versus the obligation to the relationship or the family. It can also be a conflict between meeting our own inner emotional needs and feeling included. And this can lead to a fear of isolation or a fear of being disconnected, and then overcompensating by self-sacrificing. The key with this full moon is be sure you are not overcompensating, you are not over-sacrificing, and you are taking time for yourself to integrate, to settle down, to have your own space, to have your own room to breathe. That is Taurus. Taurus is the bull chewing grass all day long and barely moving. And this is a sign that is prejudiced against by our world, because you're too lazy, you're too slow, you're too selfish, you're too sensual, etc. And it's like, this is the practice now. Slow down, be sensual, come into your body, get a massage, go take a nice bath, whatever it is. You know, go get your feet on the earth. Go off into the garden and smell the flowers. These are ways of doing the full moon in Taurus. And this is important, because in order to actualize that creativity of the North Node and Ceres in Leo. This is what we have to do. We want to create, we want to release, we want to come into our heart and our own inner child and not feel oppressed by the world. The Saturn-Chiron square is bringing up all that oppresses us, and we have to somehow digest and move through all of these dynamics. And the way to do this is to create the safe space to process, the space to breathe, to separate from the dramas and the distractions, enough to raise your own energy levels. You know, the Buddha was enlightened while the sun was in Taurus. He was trying to go the ascetic Scorpio path and starve himself to enlightenment, and it wasn't until a little girl brings him a bowl of rice that his comforts his body, comforts his stomach, and his consciousness raises and he achieves enlightenment. If we're going out there and we're duking it with the other people, with our friends, with our relationship, and it's just incessant, no room to breathe, no time to stop, obligations to the family, obligations to the other, obligations to your job, we get run down, and again, we turn into that bitter, angry scorpion who's just going to lash out. And that lashing out is an unconscious, get away from me. I need space to breathe. I need to come into my own and integrate. And so give it to yourself before the explosions, before the lashing out. Fill up your own glass. Come into your body, self-pleasure yourself, get some good food, put on some good music, put on some good incense. I've got great recommendations for all these things with my own moons, square the nodes. Please feel free to ask, email, leave a comment. I'd be happy to share. And this is the way to go back out there into the drama, the world, the interferences, and not lose our minds and go crazy. And so, there is an opportunity for a depolarization of assigned roles, of what you think you're supposed to do, of what your obligation is in relation to the other. Because just like how he said, the last new moon in Libra was exactly opposite to Uranus. Well, on the day of this full moon in Taurus, Venus in Libra is exactly opposite to Uranus once again. So the theme of continuing to experiment, reinvent, transform, liberate our relationship in how we share and connect with the other in order to be redefined in ways we never knew was possible. This is about being experimental. Who cares what your gender is, what your conditioning is, what you think you're supposed to do in order to preserve a relationship or a family or harmony? Explore and experiment and redefine and push the boundaries of how to do relationship, family, connection to the other. And we can find win-win solutions. We can find a way to be a parent and a child at the same time. You can play with your kids and not have to be the grown-ass adult who's fucking tired of having to take care of everything. And back in our day, we barely got to be a child ourselves. So be the child now. Be the child and the adult. Be the man and the woman. Be the mother and the father. This is the opportunity and this is the challenge happening right now. And a lot of these are Venus themes. On November 1st, Venus conjoins asteroid Vesta. And this is an opportunity to really focus on what is femininity. That is the principle of life. That is the sharing, compassionate, nurturing, connecting with the other, listening, reciprocating to the other. The receptive, inward femininity is what we're talking about. There's an opportunity to focus on that. What is that? Vesta and Venus are in Libra. How do we bring balance? How do we bring justice, equality, and harmony into the roles, the various dynamics of our life to integrate that feminine wisdom? And then Venus moves into Scorpio, November 7th. The Scorpio themes continuing to go deep and change and transform and evolve through relationship, through getting to the bottom of the barrel, exploring our sexual desires, exploring our unconsciousness throughout the month of November. Asteroid Juno, the partnership asteroid, is coming up to a conjunction with Pluto on November 11th. Again, same signature and theme of rebooting, transforming, and changing our relationships and our orientation to the other. Venus comes into an opposition with Pallas Athena on November 8th. And this can be exploring themes of blocked creativity or sexual flow. And Pallas Athena in particular can bring up father complexes, can bring up our own accomplishments needs versus our own intimacy, connecting, and sharing needs. How do we feel accomplished and secure, grounded in ourself? Full moon in Taurus, Pallas Athena in Aries. And how do we share intimately and connect with the other? Everything in Scorpio, and Venus moving into Scorpio. Venus moving into Scorpio. And so, again, depolarization, a flexibility and a malleability in terms of our roles, our obligations, in order to explore, experiment, reinvent, and redefine, in order to create a balance between taking care of ourselves, our own needs, our own priorities, our feeling of safety, stability, relaxation, and comfort, balanced with all of the change, involvement, and intimacy that can be going on as we continue all of these deep and profound investigations in ourselves, in our relationships, and in our world. And so again, for those of you going out trick-or-treating tonight, or regardless, enjoy this profound and deep, mystical, ethereal time as the sun in Scorpio is coming into a trine with mystical, ethereal Neptune on November 3rd. And so continue to do your transparency, penetrating into the deepest, most bottom of the barrel, mystical and profound levels of what it means to be alive, what it means to be a human being. And please do have those important conversations, whether it's being honest and transparent to yourself or to your partner, your family, or a therapist. I wish you all the best on this continued endeavor of really catalyzing change and reinventing ourselves as we actualize our most liberated and freed self-expression. And we awaken during this profound time that is igniting and awakening the need for profound change and healing in ourself and in our world. So again, so much love to your beloveds and yourself. Namaste.